Hi, everyone. So welcome to today's webinar on creating resilience in children that will foster their potential and increase their success in the world. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC, housed at Rutgers School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Kati, and I'm the project coordinator of this center and will be facilitating the webinar today. Next slide, please. Next slide. The MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health and other related workforces to deliver evidence-based and empirically supported practices to individuals with mental illnesses. Please visit the MHTTC Network website for additional information at mhttcnetwork.org. Next slide, please. And if you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products the Northeast and Caribbean MHTTC is providing, please sign up to receive our email communications. You can sign up at the bit.ly link provided on the screen. Next slide, please. Following the webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform future activities. The surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to the completion of these surveys. So we thank you in advance for your feedback. I also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website along with the PowerPoint slides in the next couple of days. Next slide. We encourage you to interact with our presenter during the webinar by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A times towards the end of the presentation. During the webinar, our presenter may pose questions to you, so please use the chat feature to answer these questions. This presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. All material appearing in this presentation, except that taken directly from copyrighted sources, is in the public domain and may be reproduced or copied without permission from SAMHSA or the authors. Citation of the source is appreciated. Please do not reproduce or distribute this presentation for a fee without specific written authorization from the Northeast and Caribbean MHTTC. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the presenters and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS, SAMHSA for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. Now let's begin our webinar. We have with us PJ Wenger. PJ is our Center School Mental Health Lead and Senior Training and Consultation Specialist. She has over 29 years of experience working in the field of mental health and has spent a considerable amount of time in a variety of settings developing her counseling practice. These settings include psychiatric emergency, inpatient treatment with both adults and children, in-home counseling for mental health issues, residential treatment, schools, and private practice. In the school setting, PJ has worked at the elementary, middle, and high school level. In addition to this experience, PJ has been a trauma responder at the local, state, and national level. She has responded to large events like 9/11 and Hurricane Sandy, as well as traumatic events that affect schools such as suicides, traumatic deaths of staff and students, and homicides. PJ is licensed by the New Jersey State Board of Family Health Practitioners and is a certified member of the National Board of Certified Counselors. She has a master's in counseling and an EDS in marriage and family therapy. Welcome all, and then I'm going to pass it over to PJ. Thank you.
Thank you, Kati, and welcome everyone. So I like to start parenting workshops with this quote. It's not the child's responsibility to teach the parent who they are. It's the parent's responsibility to learn who the child is. And this is really important because this quote speaks to how much our children will teach us if we open our minds, our hearts, and our ears. What we need to remember is that every child is different and unique, even in a single family. So in my family, I grew up with 8 people and everyone was different. So again, something for us to remember. So the journey of parenting. Parenting is one of the hardest jobs in the world. I always tell people, when they're stressed out about their regular job, that parenting is a much harder job. And there's no cookbook, there's no script, there are no steps 1, 2, 3. Years ago, a gentleman, Dr. Spock, wrote a book on parenting, and that sort of was not very successful because lots of people bought the book, but the techniques were really founded in more research and not practicality. So sometimes that was really hard for parents. But a child's life begins with parenting, and if done in a healthy manner, they build resilience. And if they have resilience, they will be successful. And this is a journey. It's not a sprint, but a marathon. And we have to be in for the long haul. So sometimes I hear parents say to me, I just want to give my teenager away and then bring them back. And so I said, sometimes we just need to understand that they're struggling as much as we are. So when I talk about resilience, which is the biggest piece that we can give our children in order for them to be successful, I identify with these 7 crucial C's, we call them. And these are the crucial C's of building resilience. And the way to do this is based on a concept developed by Dr. Ginsburg, a pediatrician who has spent countless hours working with children from all walks of life, including children from affluent homes to children with no homes living on the streets to children living on a Lakota Native reservation. And when I started as a counselor many, many years ago and began working with children, I realized that parents were in need of help as well. And it was only when I was able to work with both sides that I found my work to be successful. And it was about this time that I read Dr. Ginsburg's first book in 2001 called "But I'm Almost 13, Raising a Responsible Adolescent." I was hooked, and I found that his subsequent books have supported my approach to counseling children and families. And I've also had the pleasure of working with Dr. Ginsburg in the past on collaborative efforts to bring this type of information not only to families, but also to colleagues in the field to be able to help parents. So what are the 7 crucial C's? I'm going to identify each, and later I'm going to go into them in more detail. So the first one is competence. And this is the ability of our child to really handle situations effectively. It is their development of skills that allow them to trust their judgments, make responsible choices, and face difficult situations. The next area is confidence. And true confidence is the firm belief in one's abilities, and it comes from competence. So competence is sort of the roots of the tree. Confidence is the trunk, and then some of the other things that we're talking about are going to be the branches. And a child gains confidence by demonstrating competence in real life situations. So the next C is connection. And connection is about having close relationships, not only with family and friends, but also with school and community. And sometimes, some of those pieces are missing. I often hear parents say, adolescents just care about their friends. And if you really talk to adolescents, they really care about their families. It's just sometimes they don't want to acknowledge that. The next one, C, is character. And this is just the fundamental sense of what is right and wrong, to ensure that children are prepared to make these healthy choices and contribute to the world and grow up to be a formidable, successful adult. The next C is contribution. And this is helping children to know that the world is better because they are part of it. I like to go back to the story of Rudolph, and Rudolph was certainly a child whose parents were embarrassed by him, shamed of him, and he really needed to grow into himself to understand his contribution to the world. So a personal contribution gives children a sense of purpose. So for example, in this COVID, it's been really hard for kids, and we talk about lifting kids up, and so they have positive experiences. And so one of my teenage groups decided that they were going to learn a new skill, and they went on Pinterest, and the group of them learned to knit, and they knit scarves for homeless individuals. And again, the scarves were not perfect. There were mistakes. They had a blast learning this skill and making them and knitting with each other. And then they were able to give them away and contribute. So again, just a simple example. Coping. So coping is really children learning to deal with stress and better able to overcome and deal with some of life's challenges. So a lot of times when I see children in my private practice, especially teenagers, and parents bring them in because they're depressed or anxious, sometimes what is really underlying that is that the child has no coping skills to deal with some of those emotions and feelings. So coping is a really important piece. And I spend a lot of my time teaching coping strategies, not only to the children, but helping the parents to recognize that how they cope is what they are modeling for their children. So an important piece. The last C is control. And this is when kids realize they can control some of the outcomes in their lives by the decisions and actions that they put out there. And they're more likely to know that they have the ability to do what it takes to bounce back and be resilient and overcome adversity and come out ahead when they're able to make those decisions and look at those actions and have responsibility for them. So we're going to look at these a little bit more in depth. So the first one is competence, and what does competence really look like? Competence is ability rooted in experience. So we need to have children have experiences. And the first part of that is really building strengths. And children gain their competence and mastery by mastering tasks and challenges that they encounter. With this, they learn that they can tackle challenges. They have the ability to stick with things. They can solve problems. And a child gains competence when they're able to do this. So for example, if I have a little child and they build a sandcastle, that gives them the confidence to know that they can do that. And then when the ocean comes and washes it away, they built it again. They're developing tenacity. Now that's something we never think about, but I can tell you whenever I'm walking on the beach, I'm always watching children build sandcastles. And what we don't want to do is jump in and save them. And I'll talk about that too as well. So if they're building a sandcastle and the parent is over top of them saying, don't build it there, the ocean's going to come in, it's going to wash it away, we're really undermining the child's abilities to be confident about what they're doing. And we don't even think about that. That's such a simple example. And when the ocean does come and wash it away, sometimes I hear parents say, I told you so. And of course, that is sort of a shaming remark that we don't even think about. We're thinking about, I told you so, because we want children to pay attention to us. But the really healthy response is to say, the ocean washed it away. Are you going to build it again? Is there anything I can help with? Again, not us building it for them. It's how can I help you? And letting them direct the process, letting them be in charge. And sometimes that's a little hard for us because as parents, we want to jump in and save them and we have to breathe. So the other thing is, we really have to teach problem solving, in that case. And I use the acronym PASTA. It's something that came out of Dr. Ginsburg's work, but it's easy for people to remember. And it stands for pause and breathe. So that's the first step. So the sandcastle gets washed away. The child is frustrated. Okay, let's just take a minute and breathe, and then ask yourself how you feel. So, okay, how you doing with that? How you feeling? The child's going to tell you, I'm really mad. I don't like the ocean, And then we're going to talk about those emotions out loud. So say the emotions out loud. So they've said mad, or if they're older, I might have them write them down on a piece of paper. And then I ask them to think about those feelings and just sit with them. It's okay to have feelings. You're going to see me later talk about it's okay to have feelings. And then you ask the child or you have them ask themselves, depending on how you're doing this and how old the child is, you ask them, okay, so what do you need? What would help you to move forward? List those things out. And the child might say, well, I need help building the sandcastle again. Okay, what can I do? Not jump in and start building it for them. What can I do? And they might tell me, but that actual interaction of them directing it is so important because they learn that they can have control over some situations and they can also direct and that their decisions are okay. And again, they're building their competence. So there was a question about kids who get depressed, about too much homework or having anxiety. And this formula is great for addressing those two issues. So again, pausing, thinking about it, how do I feel, asking questions, writing my emotions down, and then, what do I need to go forward? So again, some of those things are very important when we're talking to kids about feelings. Avoid mistake making. We can, focusing on kids' mistakes. So a lot of times, because sometimes we are frustrated or we're having a reaction, we sort of hinder competence by focusing on a child's mistakes instead of focusing on what they did right. And that's really hard to do when, say the child broke something in the house. Of course, we're mad, we get frustrated, but they're cleaning it up and they've apologized, and maybe they've offered you to use their allowance money to buy it again. So it's really focusing on those positive things. Again, we don't want to have them going around breaking everything in the house, but it's really saying, okay, I see that, you're very sorry that you did that. And that was maybe mommy's favorite vase, but maybe we can go out and look for a new one. And maybe you and I can pick it out together. So again, where is my focus? Recognizing their strengths, recognizing what strengths they have. And again, it's often how we say things. And this is something you'll hear me say through the presentation is, how do we say things to our kids? So a lot of times parents say to me, well, my children don't talk to me. And I ask them, what are the questions they're asking them? And again, we're going to talk about this a little bit later as well. But it's different for when I say to a child, what did you learn today versus what did you get on that math test? Again, if I ask them what I'm learning, I'm recognizing their strengths. Different from my child draws a picture and I say, oh, you're such a good artist. And again, we think that's a wonderful compliment. But the better way is to say, I love the way you use those colors together, or tell me about your picture, because then we're recognizing a strength in the event. So we're recognizing that they really use colors well, and when they tell us about their picture, we're recognizing that they have knowledge. So again, it's about building skills. And how do we do that? Sometimes I have children write down, what do I want to happen? Okay, that's what I want. How do we get there? And what are the steps? You'll hear me say that a little bit later. Letting them fall. This is really hard for parents because again, instinctively, we want to save our children. We want to protect them from things that will hurt them. We want them to protect them from outside, influences or bad influences or negative things. But there really needs to be a space where we allow children to fall. And this goes from little on up. So one of my best examples is when a child is young and they're in those 1-2s and they're starting to walk and explore and all of that. And a bunch of adults are sitting around. If a child falls and everybody in the room goes, the child will instantly look at everybody and they recognize that there's something wrong, even though they may not be hurt, but they will start to cry because they don't know what's wrong, but they know something's wrong because they're looking at all our reactions. So even sometimes when a child isn't hurt, they will cry based on our reactions. If the child falls, and again, barring that they're not injured and they're not bleeding, and people in the room go, oh, you fell, so, you picked yourself up. What a great job. What are you going to do next? Then the child learns, hey, I fell. I can pick myself up. It's all okay. I'm still safe. My adults are okay. And so again, we have to let them fall. There needs to be a place for that. Overprotection is really not the best thing, because children who are overprotected really don't learn to make their own decisions and really have trouble making decisions and have trouble trusting themselves that they can make decisions. And then sometimes that actually leads to feeling less confident and less competent, and can lead to some of those things like feeling low self-esteem or feeling depressed. An important thing is not comparing my children. So, I did come from a large family, and in our family, we had a Mensa. My sister was incredibly intelligent. off the charts, off the scales. And many of my siblings were often compared to her. So again, it was very hard for some of my siblings to develop their own confidence because they were always in the shadow of my sister. So sometimes we really need to look at that and understand that each child is different. And each of them are going to be competent in a different way. And we need to really guide their strengths. So that is competence. And then confidence sort of fits right into competence. In order to have confidence, we need to be able to be successful at things that we're doing. We need to be able to identify our strengths, and strengths are not always tied to academics and performance on tests and things like that. Do I see the best in my child? Or do I look for the worst? So for the example is, your child makes you breakfast and they're so proud they've made you a pancake or they've made you an egg and toast, and maybe they burned the toast or maybe the kitchen is a mess. Do I focus on that they made me breakfast and this is so wonderful? Or do I focus on that there's a mess in the kitchen and I'm going to have to clean it up, or they're going to have to clean it up, or, oh my gosh, I have company coming, or, so where is our focus? Best or worst? And sometimes we do things without intention and without thinking. So again, we need to step back sometimes and really think about our reactions. Best qualities versus achievements. Again, it's not all about the grades. Are they creative? Were they able to think out of the box? Those are good qualities also. Did they try their best? That's a good quality. Sometimes I hear children tell me, and from little on, it's getting younger all the time, that their parents only care about their grades, and it doesn't matter how they feel or what's going on in their life as long as they bring home the A. And again, that's an achievement, but is it the best quality they can have? So we really need to look at that. Praising, and I think my colleague Christy talked about, how we talk to kids and how we praise them, but praise really needs to be real and authentic. It can't just be, oh, you did a good job. We really need to identify what it is they did. So not, you had a great game, you did a good job, but I really like the way you passed to your teammates and you really were aware of where everybody was. And that's a really good team player. So again, not about winning, but about the process. How did they do? And those are the qualities that are going to help them be resilient. Sometimes when we focus on academics and achievements, and it's not to say we don't have some of those expectations, but when our focus is always there, we sometimes create areas where if children can't succeed, they will resort to cheating because they know that they need to have the A, or they will lose the love of learning. And again, is the A important, or is the quality of loving to learn important? And that's a consideration we need to do. Catch them being good, and not just being good in terms of, you did your homework and I didn't have to ask you, or you did your chores and I didn't have to ask you. Those are certain catch them being good, but catch them being good in things like being kind, or, doing something for somebody else, or, playing nicely, or sharing. These are all qualities that are also good as well. And when I say stretching, this is pushing them to take, stretching beyond what they think they can do. It's not pushing them to take on more than they can handle, so they fall, because then they lose confidence. So a lot of times what I see, especially at the high school level, is there is a push for children to take AP courses and honors courses. And sometimes children are so overwhelmed that they develop things like anxiety, or they develop things like low self-esteem, because they're like, I just can't do this. And I don't know, everybody expects me to. And so when I talk to teenagers and I'm like, well, did you talk to your parents or your counselor, your teachers about that you're overwhelmed and that this is too much for you? And they're like, oh, no, I could never do that. And again, there's a difference between encouraging and pushing. If I always use the example of, a doctor, and I say to children all the time, because when they're trying to get into these high level schools, and everybody's pushing them to do Ivy League schools or, top colleges or things like that. And that's not to say we don't have them strive to that. It's a difference between pushing and encouraging. Because again, I tell teenagers all the time, do you have a doctor? And they're like, yeah. And I said, do you like your doctor? And they said, yes. And I said, do you have any idea where your doctor went to college? And they're like, no. I said, do your parents? And of course the parents say no. I said, because all we really care about is whether our doctor has lots of lawsuits or, they've messed up a surgery or those kinds of things. Where they went to college is not our first question. So again, the difference between pushing and encouraging, criticism or correction. Do we focus on what is wrong or what our child is doing right? And there is a very big difference between sensitive criticism and criticism that is really negating and really focuses on what the child is doing wrong. And then again, we're depleting their confidence level and we're depleting their competence, because if we're approaching it from that they're doing wrong, then the child thinks that they can't do anything right instead of focusing on what they are doing well. And again, we want to avoid shaming them. Some comments can be very shaming. And again, parents don't mean to do that. It just happens with intention. So sometimes, I hear teenagers saying to me, well, my parents are always saying, why can't I be more like my brother? Or why can't I be more like this person? And again, that develops a sense of shame that they are not good enough, that there's something wrong with them. And so again, sometimes our words that we're using to encourage children actually have the opposite effect. And that is something that, again, depletes resiliency. It doesn't build it. There needs to be connection. And what does connection look like? Connection is not just, I spend every Sunday with my family and we do something fun and we're all together. Connection has a bunch of different components. The first one is safety. And that's really feeling physically and emotionally safe at home. And again, if there's substance abuse, it's not a safe situation for children. If there's lots of screaming and yelling, not a safe situation. If my parents are always angry, I don't feel safe to express myself, and that's something that, again, we have to really look at. I did a response at a school over the winter, and we were outside in a tent and the children were all there, and I was doing some interventions about how anxiety feels during COVID. And the children said to me, my parents lose their patience a lot and they're very irritated. And the principal in the room said, you know what, I find that when I go home from school at the end of the day that I am losing my patience more and I am more irritable. And there was such a moment where the children realized that here's a big person admitting that, they also have some struggle. And that one comment by the principal opened up a flood of conversation from the children. So again, if they are physically and emotionally safe, they will talk. Emotional expression, how do we allow our kids to express their emotions? And I'm going to talk about this also later. And we have to look at how we express our emotions. And do we have emotions that are okay? Or do we have emotions that are not okay? I have children who grow up in families where it's not okay to cry. And so that emotion of sadness is stuffed somewhere. They're not allowed to be angry. And so that emotion is stuffed somewhere. And emotions that are stuffed eventually come out, and they're usually like a volcano. They're down there, they're bubbling, they're gurgling, and then suddenly there's an explosion. And people, adults are like, where did that come from? And what's happening? Well, they've been holding on to it because they live in a world where they can't express it. Addressing conflict. How do we work through things when we resolve problems? Do we get mad at each other and have silent treatment in our house? Because then children will learn not to speak, and that they'll learn that, problems result in a silent treatment. And so they don't want to have any problems. And so they avoid conflict, or they avoid speaking up for themselves or advocating because they don't want anybody to be mad. Do we yell and fight? And I always tell parents, when I do family sessions and they come in And it goes either way. Either the children will tell me the parents are always fighting, or they'll tell me there's no fighting and there's lots of tension. But I oftentimes will teach adults how to fight in a healthy manner, because children need to see that. But what they need to see is we have a disagreement, we sort of argue about it. And again, in civil tones and in a nice manner, without doing the laundry list or bringing up, things from the past. And we also reach a solution, because then that shows children how we do it. Family time. Family time is really important. And I know sometimes people think that teenagers don't like family time, but what I am hearing from my teenagers is that they are enjoying some of the family time that they're spending with their family when it's healthy, when they're doing healthy things and when they're having good conversations. Pride in culture. Right now, I have a lot of teenagers who are taking this opportunity in COVID to really reach out to grandparents or relatives, or spend time with their parents talking about some of their cultural traditions and things that they may not know, or picking relatives' brains about how they grew up and what the cultural traditions were in their lives, and really having some pride in it. I deal with several kids from other cultures who go to predominantly schools of one culture, and they will tell me there's so many stereotypes out there about us. And we'll talk about the stereotypes, and they will tell me during middle school they really tried to deny their culture because they were embarrassed or ashamed, because people had these stereotypes. And as they get older, they're really identifying with their culture and becoming proud of it. So again, that's something that really helps us connect. That's that community piece. Jealous of others. This is something that, sometimes we guard against our children having relationships with others, because we want them to have the relationship with ourselves. We want them to talk to us. But it's really helpful for them not only to have a connection with us, but also to foster healthy relationships with other people. And again, I tell parents, do you want your child to only be able to talk to you? Because what if something happens to you? Or what if you're not available? Don't you want them to have other relationships where they can reach out and ask for help? And so, we need to foster some of those other relationships. I'll often hear parents say to me, well, they'll talk to their friend's mom, but they won't talk to me. And I said, well, let's change how you talk to them. And so that's one step that we take. But also, let's really make a connection with their friend's mom, so that if something's happening, you are still in the loop, but they feel like they have somebody to talk to. And the last one, do I protect or do I coddle? There's a really big difference between protecting my child and coddling them, so that, again, they don't have any experiences to learn from. That's really important. And then character. So what does character look like? In school, we have, character lessons. That's a very big thing, the 6 pillars of character, and that is taught in school. But a lot of character is developed before age 5, before kids even go to school. And again, it's taught from us, the adults in their lives. How do I affect others? How does my behavior affect other people? And that's a really important piece. And that's a problem solving piece. So when we go back to that problem solving, that pasta, how do what my actions, how do they affect other people? How do they affect my siblings? How do they affect my parents? Because I tell parents, it's okay to say to your child, I love you, but I'm really frustrated by the fact that you don't think about me, or you swear at me, or you lie to me. It's okay to say those things to my kids, because then I teach them how they affect me with some of their behaviors. Recognizing their caring self. Again, this is those moments where they do something that's really caring, and I recognize it and identify it. I notice it. And I make a statement about it. Oh, it was so nice that you helped that child pick up their books, or it was so nice that you gave your lunch to your friend because they didn't have a lunch, or you shared it with them. Clarifying values. What is important? And this is something that I ask parents all the time. What's important for your child to learn? What are those values? right and wrong. That goes without saying, what is right, what is wrong. And sometimes you'll hear me say a lot through this, if we model behavior that is not right, then we can't yell at our kids when they do it and we think it's wrong. My favorite example is smoking. I have parents who say, I don't smoke in the house. I go outside, I smoke in the garage, or I smoke in the car, or I smoke on the way home from work because I never let my kids see me smoke. Kids all know you're smoking. And so then when my child comes home and they have cigarettes and they're smoking, I'm really mad at them because I'm saying, this is wrong. Well, I'm doing it. So again, that modeling is such an important piece because people often think that children aren't paying attention, and they are so paying attention to everything that we do. Community, what is their role in the community? And community involvement can start little kids. Sometimes I, tell parents will say to me, oh, my child doesn't think about anybody but themselves. And, they're always asking for stuff and they never really, and I give them the lecture that not all kids have as much as they have. Well, that lecturing doesn't help. And we'll talk about that a little later as well. But so can I develop a practice where each year I have my child bag up some of their toys to give to a child who doesn't have those toys? Or maybe we work in a soup kitchen together so that they learn that, I can contribute to the community. Racial or ethnic biases. We're learning a lot of these things children learn as growing up in a family. When children are really little, if you watch them, they really don't have any opinions about color or race or ethnicity. They're just playing. They're all together. I have children, because I spend a lot of time talking to adolescents, and some of my adolescents will tell me, when I was small, I never realized I was different, or my skin was different, or my beliefs were different. And I didn't realize that until I, maybe got to 4th or 5th grade. And then, I heard people saying things and I heard comments, again, how do we do that in our house? And what does that look like? And considerations, how do we consider other people? And that's something that we teach our children by our actions. So the next one is contribution. And contribution is a really important thing right now because we're losing so much of our sense of community. A lot of community things that we normally would have, like church or like a social group, or, sometimes even maybe the sports and activities, we don't have anymore. So it's really important to cultivate some of this contribution. And contribution also makes children feel like they have a chance to change the world, that what they do matters. A lot of times you'll hear kids say, nobody listens to us, nobody cares about what we think, but that's what we have to cultivate. Children know there's inequity, and that's something that we also need to address with them. There is world inequity. There are third world countries who don't have bathrooms, who don't have indoor plumbing, who don't have electricity, and again, we learn, how can we help that? Habitat for Humanity, when it first started, was huge because we were giving to communities that didn't have. And a lot of church groups were taking groups of children down there so that they could really learn and help and contribute. And that leads into the whole service piece. What am I doing to contribute to the world? How do I change the world? And a lot of times we forget that children are going to be the change in the world. It's what we steer them and guide them for. They're going to be the change in the world. Lots of songs have been written about it, but I sometimes think we forget that piece. And what are the opportunities? What opportunities do I have? What opportunities are out there for me? And again, what opportunities are limiting? We're always telling children, you can do whatever you want, but then they hit these limitations and they're kind of stuck, and we have to help guide them around those roadblocks. And then exemplars, who in the field, who in the world is a good example. Michelle Obama was a great example for young African-American girls growing up. Like, they looked at her and it was like, wow, somebody can get to that level. That means I can do that too. So again, what are the exemplars in the field? we need to look at that so that we can identify them and help our children identify them. And again, if a lot of times parents are very upset that children sort of identify with maybe an actor or a singer who doesn't display the best character, and we want to kind of steer them away from that. Well, that's great, but we can't steer them away from that without providing that exemplar for them to steer towards. So coping, what does coping look like? And coping is a really important thing for us to teach our children. And again, like I said before, a lot of times children have a difficult time with coping skills because we have maybe overprotected them or saved them, or we've been the tiger mom who rushes in and like saves the day because we're defending our kid, but they never develop coping skills. And an example of that is I have a child who was adopted by a couple who, again, could not have children. So he was sort of the miracle in their life, and they raised him, and mom was always on top of him. And if there was anything wrong, she was at the school, and really, was very overprotected, but very over involved. And then he went away to college, and he was having a really hard time. And so he started therapy with me, and we were doing therapy. And one day on a Friday evening, he leaves a message for me. I have an emergency. It's an emergency. I need you to call me right away. And of course, as a counselor, I'm thinking an emergency means that you're having maybe suicidal thoughts, or somebody is hurting you. Like, that's an emergency to me. And when I got on the phone with him on the telehealth, he was telling me, I'm just feeling anxious. I don't know what to do. I'm feeling anxious. And again, we had to reinforce, like, what are those skills that we learned? What are those coping skills that we learned? And when I was able to remind him of what some of those were, he was then able to use them. But again, it was really, that was a crisis, but it wasn't an emergency. But it was an emergency to him because he lost his coping skills. And again, the modeling piece, and you'll hear me say this a lot. How do parents cope with their emotions? I ask that all the time. I ask that of children, but then I also ask it of parents. So when you're angry, what is it you do? If I have a parent say to me, I run. When I'm angry, I go out and run. Okay, great. So if you run, do you tell your child, I'm really angry, I need to just go run and get something out? Because otherwise they don't know that you're using that as a coping skill. Play is a really important thing for kids to be able to play and work through some things. Coping strategies. We give kids coping strategies. I spent a lot of time in my therapy office doing that, working with parents as well as children. When we tell kids to just stop crying, just stop. And I hear that a lot. That's not helpful at all. Doesn't work. We need to help them figure out what do they need in those moments. Handling negative behaviors. Caring for self. Again, how do you take care of yourself? Because if you're not taking care of yourself, your children aren't seeing it, and they don't know how to take care of themselves. And so this is some of the things we need to look at. Control. This is an important thing. Things don't just happen randomly a lot of times. It is our actions. Things happen because of actions I take. And so we need to teach this to children. There's a difference between external control versus internal control. There's a lot of things I can't control. But external control is someone else makes all my decisions. And again, children who are denied the opportunities to make decisions, they'll grow up feeling everything happens to them. And they might become passive or pessimistic or even depressed because all their control is external. But a resilient child has internal control. They know that they can make choices and take actions, and they determine the results. And that promotes the competence and confidence. Responsibility. What am I responsible for? What am I not? I'm not responsible for my parents' divorce. I am responsible for how I treat people. And again, this is something that we can teach children. I can't control the world. And the world, when I'm growing, is one step at a time. The future is not this big ominous thing. It's one step at a time. If we always have kids looking at the future, then they forget the process of how to get there. And that's an important piece, is the process. Discipline. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Discipline, are we teaching or are we punishing? Because discipline really should be about teaching. And again, rewarding the responsibility. When our children are responsible, when they do something that is responsible, we need to acknowledge that, notice it, recognize it, and praise it. So talking to our children, this is a really important thing that I teach a lot when I'm doing therapy with families. We really need to listen to our children. And here's the problem with listening. As adults, we really don't listen, because when children are telling us a problem, we're really trying to fix it. We want to fix it. We want to make it better for them. And that is our best intention. And it's a lovely intention by parents. But what happens is children stop talking because we're really not listening to them. So for instance, a child comes home from school and says, Michael hit me in the playground. Okay. The parent who is not listening gets on the phone immediately and calls the principal. This kid hit my child in the playground. What's going to happen to this child? What's being done? How can this happen? Meanwhile, the child's looking at this and going, oh my gosh, I can't believe she called the principal. I don't want that to happen. Then there's a big thing in school. There's more problems. The child learns not to come home and tell us anything. Healthy way to handle it. The child comes home, Michael hit me in the playground. Okay, what are you going to do about that? I don't know. Okay, who can you tell about that? And I get the child to problem solve. Day 2, child comes home, Michael hit me in the playground. Okay, so what did you do? Did you use the tools that we talked about? Yes, I told the 8. And then what happened? They took Michael in for detention. Okay, and how was that? It was fine. Okay, next day, Michael hits him in the playground. Now I say to my child, you know what? I tried to let you handle this and you did your best, but sometimes things need to be handled from adults. So mommy needs to keep you safe. So I'm going to go to the school and talk to them about how we can do this so that Michael stops hitting you in the playground. So again, I allow the children to problem solve and try to figure it out themselves. But when it gets to a point where my child might be in danger, I do step in, but I let my child know why I'm stepping in. Validating children, validating their feelings, validating that what they say is okay. So my teenagers who will come home and they'll, talk about breaking up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And immediately our thought is, oh, there's lots of fish in the sea. This is one boyfriend. You're a really pretty girl. You'll have lots of boyfriends. We didn't validate anything they said. So again, they don't want to hear that. If we say to them, oh, how upsetting that must be. Like, tell me about that. How are you feeling? Then they begin to talk. We need to trust that our children have these abilities in them. Children are innate problem solvers. If you watch children try to figure things out in their play, and again, you'll have me talk about play, children need to play because they figure things out. Those children who, I had a parent who was really frustrated because the child was always taking all these things in the house and building these things, and he would name them, but he would get popsicle sticks or he would take toothpicks out of the drawer. He was always doing these things. And the parent was very frustrated because of course he made a mess, and I said to the parent, like, he's working things out. He's figuring out how he can do things and he's building skills. So instead of doing, the getting frustrated, acknowledge, I liked the way you used the popsicle sticks and the toothpicks and built your skyrocket. And, talk to the child about what they're doing. Then later I can go, okay, let's clean up because we sort of made a mess and we need to clean up because I'm going to have dinner. So again, I can get to both things that I want without depleting my child's resilience. Stop dictating. We always want to tell our children what to do. And again, with wonderful intention, because we want them to be safe. So we want to tell them what we think is the best solution. This happens a lot in middle school when children have peer problems, and they come home and this one's talking about me, or this one said I'm a whore, and right away we're saying, okay, well, you need to go to school and do XYZ. That's not what they want to hear. The better thing is to help them problem solve through. Okay, what are some things that you can do? Well, I can go to school and punch them. Okay, so if you go to school and punch them, what's going to happen? Well, I'm going to get sent to the principal's office. Okay, and when you get sent to the principal's office, what's going to happen? Well, I'm going to get taken off the trip that I want to go on. Okay, so does that work? The child will recognize that that doesn't work. Then we can go back and start again. Okay, what's another thing you can do? And see how I'm helping the child to learn to problem solve not making the decision or dictating what they're going to do. Praise I've already talked about. Controlling our emotions is a really big thing. And you'll hear me say that. One of the hardest things for parents when we're disciplining is when we discipline in an angry place, it's not effective at all. So we really need to control our emotions. And that's not to say don't have them. It's to say control them. So if I'm in a place where I'm really angry, I need to be able to say to my child, you know what, right now at this moment, mommy or daddy is really angry and I need to calm down, and then we can talk about this or we can figure this out. Doing things together and really doing things together and being present for my child. So if I have a child whose parent comes and they take him out to lunch, and she said, my dad comes and we go out to lunch and then he spends all the time on his phone. So we really don't talk. And then I come home and he leaves. Again, when I spoke to the father, he was like, well, I take her to lunch. I'm like, yeah, but this is what's happening. And he was like, you know what? She's right. And so the next time they went to lunch, dad said, let's all put our phones away and we'll just sit here and talk. What a different experience for the child. I just had a teenager say to me the other night, when I try to talk to my parents, they initially start listening. And then the next thing you know, I'm talking and they get on their phones. And she says, so I stopped talking. Then they're mad at me because I'm not talking. So again, we have to watch what we're creating and really be observant. Watch our children. We learn so much from them if we watch. Again, I've worked with little kids, and little children teach us so much. One of the best things that they teach us is to be mindful. Little children are very much in the moment. They don't hold grudges. They don't take the memories from the past and bring them into the future. They really are right in the moment. Resilient children equals positive mental health. If we have resilient children, then they will have better mental health. And these things are all part of that. Emotionally connection. We know that if children have at least one adult that they are connected to, and it doesn't have to be their mother or father, but if they have one adult that they are emotionally connected to, that goes so far in promoting positive mental health. Healthy risk taking. I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit in depth. Resist fixing versus saving, teaching problem solving. I already talked about that. Addressing emotions, teaching and demonstrating coping skills, embracing mistakes. Mistakes are how we learn. I talk to kids about Benjamin Franklin. They all know who he is. He invented the light bulb, but I talk about how many failures he had before he actually invented the light bulb. And then model. You're going to hear me talk about modeling a lot. So building emotional connection. We want to be our child's parent versus their friend. We're going to have plenty of time when they're older to be their friends. We want to have family time versus individual time. The device epidemic is something I talked about a lot, monitoring the amount of time they're on devices and how much time we're on devices. And then again, listening and getting quiet. This is how we build emotional connection, how we get our children to talk to us. Promoting healthy risk taking. Again, I love this picture. Sometimes our parents are horrified by things children want to try, but we need to be able to have them try some new things, and again, we build in the safety parameters, but we allow them to try some new things. And if we're a parent who's anxious and fearful, we sometimes pass it on to our children. We don't allow them to try new things, and even if it's something as simple as talking to a shy person, something out of our comfort zone. And again, we need to, that's that stretching, allowing them to stretch into something that just encourages them beyond what they think they can do. So again, gaining confidence, and not pushing them, and engaging in activities, healthy activities. They need to try new things and we need to try them with them. So, again, that modeling piece, stop fixing and saving our children. We have to help children learn to problem solve. If we are not around, they need those skills. So some of the things I ask kids to make pro-con lists. What's all the good things about that decision? What's all the negative things about that decision? And then they get to see it on paper. Goals. What do they want? And I have kids make SMART goals. Simple, measurable, achievable, relevant. Time sensitive. What do they want to see happen? Let's figure out how to do that. What are the steps? A solution wish list. That's what I talked about before when Michael hit me. Okay, I can go to school and punch him out. Okay, where does that get you? And we work on the solutions. What is it I want to see happen? So how do I get there? And again, who can help? Asking for help is a really important thing. And again, goes back to fostering positive mental health. Addressing emotions. Emotions are not the bad guy. They are not the bad guy. And again, sometimes we, because of how we were raised, we put emotions in categories, good emotions and bad emotions. And I tell children, all emotions are okay. It's what we do with them. So I have to really support children's emotions. I don't want to shut them down. When I hear parents tell kids, stop crying, it makes my skin crawl because again, you're asking them not to have their emotion instead of really spending some time thinking about what are you crying for? And sometimes it is silly. And as adults, we are frustrated. We don't have patience for that. But if we can change how we address them, it's really helpful. And then what do you do with those emotions? I teach kids what to do with anger. I teach them what to do with sadness. And again, they're watching us. So we need to model those things. If we take a time out when we're angry, they will learn that they can take a time out when they're angry. So there are things that we need to do to be able to address the emotions. Embracing mistakes. Mistakes are learning, always learning. And again, this quote I say to kids all the time, mistakes are that you're trying. Again, back to Benjamin Franklin, he kept trying. Focus on the process, not on the results. Identify the learning, identify what they've learned and what they've done well on. Avoid the good bad dichotomy. I try not to do bad. I do good and not so good, but I don't do bad because bad has a whole shaming connotation with it and it doesn't sit well with children. And again, modeling, illumination. How can we reframe how we're looking at things? Optimism versus pessimism. I'll never be good enough. These are all pessimistic things. I don't go to happy, happy, joy, joy, and I can do everything and I'm never going to make a mistake. But there's a middle ground. There's a balance. Okay, so maybe I'm not good at math, but I'm really good at English. Okay, so what can I do to improve my math and still be really good at English? Again, reframing their perception. I don't have to be perfect at everything. Perfection is really hard. And when we have kids who are go down that perfectionistic road, they sometimes have a breakdown because they're so trying to be perfect all the time, and nobody can be perfect all the time. And looking through another lens, how else can we look at things? So again, even in a failing of a test, okay, how can we look at that? What did I learn from that? What do I need to do differently? And again, it's not presenting the happy, happy, joy, joy. It's the balance and the realism. So again, we're going to talk about discipline for a few minutes. I know that I'm coming up on time and I want to leave time for Q&A, but discipline is about teaching and guiding, not about punishing. It's really not about obeying the rules as much as, again, that right, wrong piece. It's about teaching and guiding children to be able to make good decisions so that we don't have to discipline them. So there's a no drama connection cycle, we call it. And this is from Dan Siegel. And it's one of the books that I recommended at the end. And, we want to communicate comfort. We want to validate kids. We want to listen and we want to reflect back to them. And these are some of the important pieces. Communicate comfort. We can't deal with an issue until we're calm. So we need to be calm and the child needs to be calm. If you ever see somebody trying to reason or address or talk to a child who is screaming, it doesn't work. The child isn't calm, and so their brain is not in a place to be able to hear you. And we need to calm them down. And sometimes the most powerful tool you have is your touch, rubbing their back or, putting your hand on your shoulders and helping them to breathe and breathing with them, our body posture. We need to get down on their level or lower because our feelings need to sort of match their feelings. So if we're calm and quiet, then they can get calm and quiet. It's a way we teach our children self-regulation. We model it. I talk about the dog scenario. If we approach a dog and it's a little aggressive, the first thing we do is we get a very soft voice and we crouch down and we give it the back of our hand. And the message we're sending is, I am not a threat. That's the message we need to send to our children. If we're standing there and we'll talk about verbals and nonverbals. If we're standing there and we're looking angry, but we're not saying anything, child still knows that you're angry and they're going to get it. So we want to do things non-threatening, and we want to be very careful about our words, and sometimes it is better to not say anything at all until we can breathe and calm down. We want to validate. So this is hearing children, really validating their experience. Okay, they broke up with their boyfriend of 2 weeks because it's middle school and they have a different boyfriend every 2 weeks or a different girlfriend. And instead of saying, oh, this is middle school, you'll get over it or whatever, it's really validating. That must be really hard. And how does that feel? We're not in their shoes. So we need to let them tell us what it's like to be in their shoes. Avoid denying their feelings or minimizing that. Oh, you'll get over that. Time will heal that. Those things are not helpful at all. And the other thing is we need to allow the child to say how they feel and not us assign the feeling to it. And identify their emotions, acknowledge them, validate that their experience is real. Even if we think it's silly and we know that in, 3 days, they're going to forget about this boyfriend and be on to the next boyfriend or the next girlfriend. We still need to validate it at this moment. It's the most horrible thing that's happening in their life. And listen, I love this picture because I tell parents all the time, I have parents bring children to me all the time and they say, I don't think they're going to talk to you. They weren't up for counseling. They didn't want to do this. And the door closes and I have a child in front of me who is what I call verbal vomit. I don't say a word. They talk the whole time. And again, if we get quiet, they will talk. We have to stop doing things, interpreting how they feel and arguing with them that there's a better way, or defending what we're doing, or lecturing them. Children don't hear it all. They stop hearing us. If we're asking questions and being curious about where they are, there then is a communication. And again, telling them to just stop doesn't work. Reflect. So we focus on our child's story. Tell your child back what they say. Don't interpret them. Let them know that you heard them. Recognize, I hear what you said. You're telling me you were really mad when I told you to come inside for dinner and you wanted to stay and play with your friends. Okay, dinner was ready. It's on the table. How can we work this out? And again, it's not a negotiation process all the time. It's really, there are a couple principles. I'm going to talk about those a little bit later, but it's empathizing with our children. They want to play. Play is really important to them, and sometimes when we interrupt it, it is frustrating for them. And so we have to build in some things to help them. But understanding their experience and, kids are fighting, and a child says, I hate my brother. And I know parents react to that hate word, and we don't want to reinforce that, but we do want to validate and understand. So again, I get that you're mad at your brother, but you two do a lot of things together that are fun, but right now you're really mad at him. So you're letting the child know that, yes, you understand that they're mad, but there's also another place where they do have fun with their brother. And sometimes children lose that perspective. So that is that reframing and giving them another perspective. So you're letting them know that you understand how they feel, but you don't want to reinforce that negative hate thing. And again, children need to know they're not always going to feel this way. And that's that perspective of, oh, but sometimes you do have, fun with your brother. Not, no, you don't hate your brother. That's not the way to do it. So there are a couple principles about this. One is, we're waiting till we are ready and our children is ready. That immediate discipline of we're in an angry place and we're like, I'm just going to take your phone or you're grounded for 3 weeks. That isn't helpful at all, because then what a child learns is that there's always going to be this horrible consequence. And so that's what, again, leads children to begin to lie or to begin to be secretive because they don't want that reaction. So again, if I'm angry, I need to be able to calm down and I need to say to my child, you know what, I'm really mad right now and I'm not going to think clearly and you're really mad right now. So how about we just take a few minutes, we'll have a breather, and maybe in about half hour, we'll come back and talk about this. That way we're both calm and then we can figure things out. And again, it's being consistent and not rigid. I tell parents all the time, the biggest things in therapy that I'm always talking to parents about is setting boundaries and being consistent, and those are very helpful things. So, for example, if homework is always done at a certain time, homework has to be done. But if there's a special event, I could maybe change the time of when the homework gets done. The other thing is giving kids a mental health day. When kids come to therapy with them, I give them 2 free passes that they can use at any time. They just have to give it to their parent to say, I'm using my free pass to get out of therapy today. And I honor that. And I do the same thing, for children, at school. Sometimes they need a mental health day. So again, restorative discipline, we talked about creating safety, asking questions, listening to them. Restorative conversations is about helping kids understand their feelings and their responses to the tough situations, and then developing alternative actions, helping them to problem solve or reflect on how their actions impacted. Ask kids what they can do to make things right. Ask them what solution they can come up with, and help them. That's the guiding principle. So my ending is that I really feel like parenting is like being the lighthouse. We're on the stable shoreline that children can safely navigate the world, and we make sure they don't crash into the rocks, but trust that they have the capacity to learn to ride the waves. And sometimes that's scary, watching our child ride the waves. So with that, we're at the Q&A period. If there's questions, I'd be happy to field them. If I haven't answered a question that somebody asked in the workshop registration, please feel free to ask it. I will try to address it. If either Christy or myself has not addressed those questions through our presentations, I'd be happy to address it.
Thank you, PJ, so much for your presentation and for providing us with a wealth of information and resources regarding resilience. I'd like to invite all of our participants today to please enter any comments or questions that you have in the chat box. Could you advance the slide to the QR code, please? Thank you. So also in the chat box, I included our bit.ly link that takes you to our brief survey. If you would be so kind, a lot of our programs, our training programs and free, webinars are at no cost to you, because, we are federally funded, and these surveys are closely linked to our funding. So we thank you in advance. So PJ, while people gather their questions, I have a question for you. So we are, as you all know, we are going through a very collective experience with the COVID-19 pandemic. And as such, what advice do you have for parents who just feel very overwhelmed? There's a lot of expectations with performing at work, and that leads to stress, that the children stay, keep up and up to date with all of the expectations with schooling. And that's another source of stress, and trying to actually just live a normal life while fostering this resilience in this collective trauma, if you will.
So one of the things, certainly we've been talking about this from the beginning, is really having a schedule, not only for ourselves, but our kids, and building into that schedule a balance. So I hear parents saying, I'm working all the time, and then I get off work and I have to do the kids' school and all of this stuff. And children are feeling very overwhelmed as well. But it really helps to do a couple things. One, build into a schedule of breaks that you're going to take. Breaks for children, breaks for adults, breaks for families to do things together. It helps to talk about how everybody is feeling. Again, we don't have to be all-knowing, all-powerful parents. We can say to a child, I'm feeling anxious too, and here are some of the things I'm feeling anxious about, and problem solve what we can do about them differently. Again, try new things, try new endeavors, learning new things. This is all skill building. So those are some of the really important pieces. And then I really encourage parents to do relaxation stuff with your children, whether that looks like doing a 10-minute yoga tape, or whether it looks like walking outside and really getting in touch with your senses and asking your kids, okay, tell me, 5 things you see, 5 things you hear, 5 things you smell. Those are relaxation techniques that I can just do regularly with my kids. So those kinds of mindful activities are really important. Having balance. We need to have fun, family fun. And again, family fun looks like we all sit down as a family, and maybe every weekend it is a different person's turn in the family to decide what that fun activity is going to be for the weekend. And again, even if I don't like it, I go along with it because I know that the next weekend maybe might be my turn. But we really reinforce that we can have fun, and children can, again, have decision making and choice about what are some of those things that we can do. And so we don't just get into that humdrum cycle of every day looks the same.
Sounds good. Thank you. Also, speaking of the COVID-19 pandemic, as you already know, this is causing a lot of stress in children who either attend in person or attend, remotely, or a hybrid of both.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's hard to maintain that consistency, in midst of us all going and being in this survival mode and ensuring that we stay safe and don't, catch the virus or, somehow pass the virus on to our loved ones. What are also some other stress relieving activities for children that they can explore that can be rather safer to do? I know you mentioned certain apps and things like that. So I just wanted your take on that.
So there's a lot of resources online for fun things with children. And I can certainly put those together and send them um, to you guys. But we really need to begin to get children back in their bodies. So some of the research around trauma really tells us that we're not grounded. We're not breathing, we're not moving our body, we're not getting fresh air. And those things are really, really important for both adults and children. And again, when we're locked in the house and we're, afraid to go out, that creates some of that anxiety that, again, because of our fears as adults, we may pass that on to our children. And so we need to be able to, again, reframe that and change their perception of, okay, we can go out, we can go for a drive, or we can go for a hike, or we can go for a walk in the park, and we can wear our mask and maintain social distance, but still do some things that get our body moving. We're seeing a lot of, especially in teenagers, overeating, in children overeating because they're at home and the cabinets are right there. And instead of doing something different, they're reaching for food. So again, really important to do what we call body work. And if that looks like yoga, walking, some of my college kids are doing meditation and they're finding it very helpful. And it helps to do it together. Not only having our children do it, but us do it with them. I say that a lot to educators. Educators do these things with your students because it helps you as much as it helps them. So a lot of body work is really important, either physically moving, and again, I have children who go on TikTok and they find a dance and then they have their whole family do the dance. And parents are like, I haven't danced like that in years, but they find that it's fun and they're laughing and they're, again, connected. So we can use some of these things to actually pull some resources for us to do when we're feeling burnout, we can't think of things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we don't have any further questions in the chat box. I want to thank everyone for attending and for your participation. I will follow up with everyone, regarding the link to the recording of this webinar for this workshop, parenting workshop, as well as a certificate of completion and the survey link in case you missed it, as well as PJ slides for your reference. PJ, do you have any last comments before we conclude?
Yeah, I'm just going to put my email in the chat box so that if you have questions that you don't necessarily want to ask on the public forum, you can certainly email me. The other thing is I'm going to move down to, these are 3 books that I recommend. If you feel like getting some reading and, you want to follow up on some of these concepts, these are 3 books that I recommend. So those will also be available on the PowerPoint. So I'm just going to back up to that evaluation code because that's necessary. And again, don't underestimate your value as parents. Parenting is one of the hardest jobs in the world. And, value yourself and have lots of self-compassion for yourself because this is not an easy job.
Yes, absolutely. It's not. Thank you, PJ, and thank you, everyone. And we hope you have a good evening and that you stay safe and well. Take care.
Bye-bye.